It was my 65th birthday, and my son showed up 2 hours late, holding a crinkled plastic bouquet with the price tag still dangling off the stem. He handed it to me in front of everyone and said with a smirk, "At least these won't die like the last ones. You don't have to lift a finger." Laughter. From my own guests. I smiled. But something inside me went cold, because while they all saw a joke, I saw a son who thought I was just as disposable. If that's what I'm worth, plastic, then plastic is what he'll get. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I used to be the kind of mother who saved every macaroni necklace, every smudged birthday card with misspelled words like love and birthday. I kept them all in a velvet box under my bed, my time capsule of love. Before everything changed, I was a woman who believed that the more you gave, the more you were loved. I raised Brandon alone after my husband died of pancreatic cancer. He was only 10. I remember the way he clutched my arm during the funeral, hiding his face in my sweater. After the service, he handed me a wild daisy he'd plucked from the church garden. "For you, Mom, because Dad said you're the strongest flower." That's who he used to be. I was a school teacher, 32 years of third graders, construction paper crafts, and book fairs. I taught kids to say please and thank you, to look adults in the eye, and to write thank you notes by hand. I raised Brandon with those same values. We didn't have much, but we had meaning. On weekends, we'd watch black and white movies and eat grilled cheese in bed. Every Sunday night, we wrote one thing we were grateful for and stuck it on the fridge. His sticky notes used to say things like, "My mom's hugs," and "When she makes my sandwich into a dinosaur." But things began to shift once he got into that tech startup job. First came the long silences, the unread texts. Then, "Sorry, can't make dinner, something came up." He stopped coming home for Christmas one year. I found out later he was in Cabo. Still, I kept showing up. Money for rent when he had cash flow issues. A few thousand for a temporary car situation. I even helped with the down payment for his condo, thinking maybe that would help him feel grounded. He never said thank you. Not really. He'd say, "You know I got you, right?" But he never did, and I let it slide. I told myself he was just busy. That he loved me, but life was noisy. That maybe if I stayed quiet and supportive, he'd come around. When he told me he didn't believe in birthdays anymore, "It's just a Hallmark holiday, Mom," I laughed and said, "Well, I still believe in cake." That year, I baked it anyway. German chocolate, just the way he used to like it. He didn't come, but this year felt different. This time, I had hope. I'd been lonely lately. Most of my friends were downsizing, moving closer to grandkids. Some weren't around anymore. I thought maybe this year he'd see that time was slipping, that I was still here, still holding space for him. I spent the week before my birthday preparing everything. I polished the silver, arranged tea sandwiches, pulled out the old photo albums to show his childhood friends. I wore my late husband's cufflinks as earrings, a silly tradition that always made Brandon laugh when he was little. I even left a note under his slice of cake, the way I used to on his lunchbox. "You make the world better just by being in it." But he never saw it. He didn't even eat the cake. He walked in with those plastic flowers like they were a joke, made that crack about low maintenance, then disappeared before the coffee was poured. I cleaned everything up alone that night. Poured the uneaten, punched down the sink, packed up the leftover sandwiches into Tupperware for the freezer. Then I stared at the plastic bouquet on my kitchen counter. The cellophane crinkled under the weight of my palm, and something broke. Not the kind of break that makes you cry. No, this was quieter, like a rope snapping inside your chest. Because it wasn't about the flowers. It wasn't even about the birthday. It was about realizing I'd taught a child how to read, how to write, how to tie his shoes, and somehow forgot to teach him how to see me. That's who I was before everything changed. A woman who gave and gave, believing that love would come back around. But now I saw clearly. I was not his emergency fund. I was not his guilt-free safety net. And if he thought plastic was good enough for me, then it was time he learned just how cheap plastic could feel when it's handed back in the form of a smile and a dead swipe. There was a time when birthdays meant something between us. When Brandon was little, he would spend weeks crafting my cards, construction paper hearts, glitter glued too thick, the occasional crayon drawing of me with a superhero cape. One year, he saved up his allowance and bought me a single rose from the gas station. He couldn't have been more than 8. He woke me up before sunrise, holding it like it was a royal offering. I got it for you, 'cause you always say one thing with love is better than 10 without. That boy felt like a miracle. But birthdays changed after he went to college. They started feeling more like obligations than celebrations. First came the generic gift cards, Starbucks, Amazon, the kind you grab at the checkout line. Then came the years where I got a rushed phone call, or worse, a voicemail that ended with, "Anyway, happy birthday, Mom. Hope it's chill." Last year, he texted me at 11:47 p.m. Just 3 words, HBD old lady. No punctuation, no heart emoji, nothing. Still, I told myself, maybe next year. This year, I planned ahead. I invited close friends, 3 women from my book club, a couple from church, and Mrs. Caro from next door who still wears pearls to tea. Everyone was excited to finally meet Brandon. I hadn't realized until I heard myself saying it aloud. It'll be so special. He hasn't been home in over a year. How much hope I'd pinned to that day. I baked his favorite German chocolate cake from scratch. Not a mix. I cracked. Each egg with care sifted the flour the way he liked. No lumps. I even found a vintage cake stand at a local thrift shop. He used to love when I made things extra fancy. I set the table with china we hadn't used since his high school graduation. I lit the lavender candles he used to say made the house smell like hugs, and I wore the blue cardigan he once called my lucky color. Everyone arrived on time. Brandon didn't. I kept checking my phone, refreshing the screen, making excuses. He probably got stuck in traffic. He's always running late. Creative minds, you know? 2 hours later, the front door finally creaked open. He waltzed in without apology, holding the plastic flowers like they were a joke he was too proud of. "Look what I got the birthday queen," he said, plopping them on the table like a gag gift at an office party. "Low maintenance, like you." Should be. People laughed. The kind of laughter that doesn't come from joy but discomfort. The kind people use to fill a silence they don't know how to hold. I smiled, because that's what women of my generation are taught to do. But something inside me was already retreating. He didn't notice the cake. He didn't ask about the people at the table. He didn't stay for tea or make conversation. He was there and gone in under 15 minutes. Mrs. Caro said later, "That boy needs a mirror." And a belt. The comment made me laugh. But that night, when I was alone, it wasn't funny anymore. After everyone left, I sat with those plastic flowers under the kitchen light. The bouquet was stiff and hollow. Even the stems were fake, green plastic wrapped in peeling tape. The tag was still attached, $3.49, and that's when I saw the metaphor. He didn't just give me something meaningless. He gave me something designed to look like care without ever requiring actual care. No water, no trimming, no tending, just a cheap symbol that would never die, but never grow either. That's when I realized I was no longer the mother in his life. I was the utility. The woman who helped pay off his student loans, covered his first failed startup with my savings, and gave him access to 2 of my credit cards for emergencies. I hadn't seen a single repayment, not even an offer. And every time I tried to ask gently about it, he'd say something like, "You always said you'd be there for me, right?" Or, "Don't worry, Mom, you can't take it with you." But love isn't an ATM, and motherhood isn't a contract where only one person holds the pen. That night, I gathered every piece of mail I'd ignored, Bank statements, overdraft notices, alerts that he'd exceeded my credit card limit. Again. Then I poured a glass of wine and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote down every transaction. That wasn't mine. Every accidental subscription, every dinner he charged, every Uber ride, every luxury grooming service, every clothing store he said he barely used. I sat there in silence and watched the sum rise higher and higher. And when I reached the total, just under $11,000, my hands didn't shake. They steadied because I finally saw the full picture. I hadn't lost my son. I'd just finally seen who he'd become. And if he thought I'd keep financing that version of him, it was time to show him what happens when you hand plastic to a woman who still knows how to cut. You never use that card anyway. When I told him I was concerned, he replied, "It's not like you're struggling, Mom. You own your house. You're fine." Fine. That's what he thought of me, an endless well of fine. Someone who didn't need boundaries or respect. Just access. And the truth? I had let it happen. Piece by piece, transaction by transaction, I had trained him to believe I was his backup plan. I was his invisible line of credit, always available, never appreciated. That month, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through old family photos, ones I hadn't touched since Brandon moved out. In every single one, I was the glue, smiling at birthdays, holding him close during thunderstorms, standing behind him at science fairs and spelling B's and first recitals, clutching camcorders and tissues. But in every recent photo on his social media, he stood alone or with women I'd never met, drinks in hand, designer clothes, captioned with phrases like, "Grind now, shine later." I recognized the shirt in one post. I had bought it for him last Christmas, $180 for something I had to order online because he said he didn't wear mall brands anymore. He hadn't even tagged me in the thank you post. It wasn't that I needed credit. I just wanted evidence that I still lived somewhere in his heart. But I didn't. And the worst part? When I mentioned the charges to a friend at Bridge Club, just lightly in passing, she said, "Oh, honey, you should have cut him off years." Ego. Cut him off. The phrase rattled around in my head like loose change because it felt wrong, unnatural. This was my child. I had sung to him when he had night terrors, rubbed his back when he cried about failing algebra, slept in a chair beside his hospital bed after he broke his collarbone on a skateboard. How do you cut off someone you helped stitch together? But then I remembered what my husband once told me, back when Brandon was just 3 and threw a tantrum so loud we had to leave a restaurant. Love doesn't mean saying yes. Sometimes it means saying no so they remember what yes is worth. That night, I pulled out the credit cards from my purse, 2 of them, both in my name, both maxed out by my son. I stared at them until dawn, and by morning, I'd made my decision. I drove to the bank in my Sunday shoes, sat down across from a young woman in a navy blazer, and asked to cancel both cards. She clicked her keyboard, asked if I wanted to issue new ones. "Yes," I said. "But this time, make them fake." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I want cards that look real, but they aren't linked to any account. No money, just plastic. The kind you hand someone when you're done playing along." It took a little creativity, a few favors from my friend's nephew who worked in prop design, but within 2 weeks, I had them, 3 flawless replicas. My name embossed in gold, chips, swipeable stripes, absolutely worthless, and I had just the person to give them to. If he thought I was his fool, I'd give him the performance of a lifetime. Plastic flowers for my birthday? Fine. Here came my return gift. Plastic credit cards, prettier than the truth, and just as empty. I held the 3 plastic cards in my hand like they were relics, glossy, shiny, empty. They looked so real, it almost hurt to know they held nothing. But then again, hadn't I been handing out emotional credit for years? Lending love with no repayment, giving grace with no limits? The cards weren't cruel. They were a mirror. That night, I opened the velvet box under my bed, the one I hadn't touched since Brandon moved out. Inside were 30 years of memories. Crayon. Cards, the macaroni necklace with a piece missing, a paper tie he made me for Mother's Day when he was 5. So you can wear something fancy to work, Mommy. And a photograph. Brandon, no older than 10, standing in our backyard, holding a fistful of daisies. The light hit his face just right. He looked like his father. I'd nearly forgotten that day. It was my first birthday after my husband died. I hadn't wanted to celebrate. I was still waking up with my husband's name in my mouth and falling asleep to the sound of my own crying. But Brandon, little as he was, had woken up early, combed the backyard with a plastic pail, and picked every daisy in sight. He tied them together with a shoelace. When he handed them to me, he whispered, "Dad said you should still have flowers." I broke that day. Collapsed in the grass, holding him, thanking God that something beautiful had survived. That boy, that moment. It had once been enough to save me, but now I barely recognized the man who had taken his place. I pulled out my phone and texted Brandon. Just a simple message. "Do you have time to talk this week? Just you and me." No answer. A day passed, then 2. I checked his Instagram. He was at brunch. Shirtless, laughing, clinking glasses with friends I didn't know. The caption said, "No stress, no mess, just vibes, no stress." I had stress. I had sleepless nights, debt I hadn't planned for, and a son who once needed me like air and now treated me like a toll booth. I put the phone down and went for a walk. No destination, just movement. I ended up on the bench outside the church, the one where Brandon was baptized. The door was locked. It was midweek, but I didn't need to go inside. I just sat there, breathing, letting the wind sting a little. A woman walked by with a toddler. The child dropped their toy, and the woman bent down, kissed the top of their head, and whispered something I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to. I knew that look, that low hum of fierce love. I used to hum like that too. When I got home, I opened a drawer in the hallway desk and pulled out the stack of cards Brandon had given me over the years. As he got older, the cards got colder. One simply read, "Happy B-Day. Hope it's good. B." That was it. I packed them away, not in anger, but with a kind of finality, a soft burial, because sometimes the only way to stop grieving someone is to admit they're not who you lost. They're who they chose to become. Later, that night, I sat down with a pen and paper. I didn't write to Brandon. I wrote to myself, a letter that said, "You are not a bank. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. You are not failing." And then I added, "You are done pretending this is love." I folded the letter and placed it inside the empty credit card sleeve. It fit perfectly. Have you ever felt like someone you loved just stopped seeing you, stopped remembering who you are? If you've been there, you're not alone. If you feel safe doing so, share your story in the comments. By the next morning, I was calm. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just wrapped the 3 fake credit cards in tissue paper and tucked them into a box. And as I tied the ribbon around it, I whispered to myself, "Let's see how low maintenance this gift feels when it's him on the other side." He thought I was too soft to teach him a lesson, but he forgot steel doesn't make noise when it snaps. It just cuts clean. The package looked beautiful, wrapped in deep green tissue paper, tied with a cream ribbon. I'd even added a handwritten note, just like old times, "For emergencies, with love." Mom. No sarcasm, no bitterness, just neat. Cursive and a steady hand. Brandon came by that Saturday afternoon, sunglasses still on his head, barely knocking before letting himself in. "Hey," he said, distracted. "I can't stay long. Just picking up that charger I left." He didn't. Notice the cake I'd baked, or the book I'd placed by the armchair that he once asked me to read when he was 12, A Wrinkle in Time. He didn't see anything, but I saw everything. He looked tired, yes, but also wired. That kind of chaos energy that follows people who think the world owes them momentum. I handed him the box. "What's this?" he asked, tugging at the ribbon. "Something you'll appreciate more than flowers," I said gently. "Just a little safety net." His expression changed instantly. A flash of excitement, the kind he used to get when he spotted presents under the tree. He pulled the tissue apart and found the 3 cards nestled like treasure. "Mom, are these what I think they are?" "They look just like the real ones," I said. "Use them, only when you truly need to." He laughed. "You really came through, huh?" "Wow, I was stressing about next week's rent." No thank you, no hug. Just the casual confidence of someone who believed, once again, that I'd bailed him out. He kissed the air near my cheek, said something about grabbing coffee with friends, and was gone before I could blink. I stood there, hands still folded, and exhaled slowly. Relief didn't come all at once. It came in drops. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window. There was peace in the quiet, peace in not checking my phone, peace in knowing that, for once, I had made the first move, not from fear, but from clarity. I didn't owe him an explanation. I owed myself freedom. And for a while, it felt like a reset. For the first time in years, I spent a full day without thinking about what Brandon needed. I walked to the park, had lunch with an old friend, bought myself a scarf I didn't need. My house was still, but not lonely. There's a difference, and for a few blissful days, the phone was quiet. No fraud alerts, no desperate calls, until Wednesday. It started with a voicemail. "Hey, Mom, weird thing. Card didn't go through at the rental place. Could you check on that?" Then a second. "Still not working. Tried to buy groceries, too. You sure these are active?" And then a third, less polite. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. I'm literally standing in line at a pharmacy and I can't even swipe. Did you mess something up?" I didn't respond. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, sliced a piece of cake, and sat at the kitchen table like nothing had changed, because in a way, nothing had, except me. He had received his flowers. Now he was holding mine, just as fake, just as thoughtless. It wasn't revenge. It was reflection. The world he'd handed me on my birthday, insincere, careless, hollow, was now his to carry, and I had returned to myself. He thought the cards were keys. What he didn't realize was I had already changed the locks. By the end of the week, my phone lit up with 6 missed calls in a row. Brandon never called like that. Not unless something was on fire, or his ego was. I finally picked up on the 7th ring. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" His voice was tight, sharp, like a man pushed too far by something too small. "I've tried 3 times to pay my rent. Card won't work. I'm locked out of my co-working space, and my Postmates account just froze." I sipped my tea. "Oh dear, that must be frustrating." "Frustrating?" "Mom, you gave me faulty cards." I let the silence do the talking. He filled it. "I had to call my girlfriend's roommate to cover me today. Do you know how humiliating that is?" I smiled faintly. "Must be." "You said they were for emergencies." "I did." "Well?" I paused, measuring my words. "Did you ever stop to wonder what kind of emergency I might have been in?" He didn't respond. "I gave until it hurt, Brandon. I gave you cards. I gave you credit. I gave you years of believing that if I just kept giving, you'd remember how to care. You handed me plastic flowers and called it love. I handed you plastic cards and called it mercy." A long silence. Then, bitterly, "So this is payback?" "No," I said quietly. "This is the bill finally arriving." He hung up. I stared at the phone for a while, expecting tears, expecting regret. But what I felt was lightness, like I'd set down something I didn't realize I'd been carrying. A few days passed, no calls, no texts. Then, on Sunday, he showed up. No warning, no knock, just a shadow through the lace curtain and a thud as he closed the screen door. I opened the door and found him standing there, plastic cards in one hand, the faded bouquet of birthday flowers in the other. "They're useless," he said, holding them up. I know. He walked past me into the kitchen like it was still his place, dropped the bouquet in the trash. "You made your point, okay? You embarrassed me." I turned to him slowly. "No, you embarrassed yourself. I just stopped hiding it for you." He stood there, tense, arms crossed. "So what now? You cut me off for good?" "I cut off access, not love. There's a difference." He didn't speak for a while. I watched him scan the kitchen, the same kitchen he used to sit in while doing homework, legs swinging, asking me how to spell tomorrow. It felt like he was seeing it again for the first time. He ran a hand over the old oak table. "I didn't mean to forget." "I know," I said. "But you did. I thought you didn't mind helping me." "I didn't mind helping you. I minded becoming invisible." His posture softened slightly. "So what now?" I opened a drawer, pulled out a photo. Brandon at age 10, grinning beside the daisy bush. He was covered in dirt and joy. I handed it to him. "This is who I raised," I said. "Not the man who treats people like resources, not the man who thinks love is transactional." He stared at the photo, blinked twice, said nothing. I didn't press. "Take your time," I told him. "But understand this. My heart isn't a savings account you dip into when yours is low." He nodded. A slow, shame-drenched nod. Then he left. No dramatic exit, no slammed door, just a quiet walk back to his car, plastic cards still clutched in his fist, and for the first time in years, I didn't chase him. I stayed in the kitchen, poured myself a second cup of tea, and hummed an old lullaby I used to sing when he was sick. The house was still. But it didn't feel abandoned. It felt reclaimed. He thought I'd be waiting with open arms and open accounts. Instead, he found a mother with her spine back and her silence finally expensive. 2 weeks passed. No word from Brandon. I didn't reach out either, not out of punishment, just preservation. I'd spent too many years trying to rescue a version of him that no longer existed. It was time to see if he could do the rescuing now. The days were quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned, not empty. Then one Thursday morning, I heard the mwah crunch of gravel outside. His car. I stayed seated on the porch, shelling peas into a bowl on my lap. The same way I used to when he was little, playing at my feet, asking me endless questions about clouds and time and why people die. He walked up slow, hands in his pockets. No plastic cards this time, no bouquet, just a worn man looking for a door he used to walk through without knocking. He sat on the step next to me, didn't say anything at first, just watch my hands work. "You still do that?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Some things don't change." He pulled a folded slip of paper from his jacket. I braced myself. It was one of the fake credit cards, taped to a note. "I get it now." That was all it said. "I didn't mean to make you feel used," he murmured. "I was just so used to being caught. I forgot falling had consequences." I didn't reply. Not yet. I let the silence grow legs and walk around us. Finally, I asked, "What did you do when the cards didn't work?" "I panicked," he admitted. "I blamed you. I borrowed money from people I don't even like, slept on someone's couch for a few days, cried in my car." "Good," I said softly. He blinked. "Good?" "I wanted you to feel something real again, even if it hurt." He looked down, nodding. It did. We sat like that for a while. Eventually I stood and went inside. I came back with a small wooden box and placed it between us. He opened it slowly. Inside was a real credit card, this one active, with a limit, and his name on it. He stared at it like it might vanish. "I had it made 2 years ago," I said. "Back when I thought you might turn a corner. I held on to it, just in case." His eyes flicked up. "You're giving it to me?" I slid the box back toward me. "No," I said calmly. "Not yet." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "This one doesn't come with blind trust. It comes with terms." He leaned in, listening. "You repay what you can, when you can. No charges over $200 without a conversation first. You send me your statements once a month, not because I need to babysit you, but because you need to see them. Every dollar, every choice." He nodded slowly. "Okay. And if you ever speak to me like I'm an obstacle again, the card's gone." And so is this version of me, the one still holding out hope. "I understand," he whispered. I believed him. Not completely, but enough to start again. He reached for the box. I let it stay between us. "One more thing," I added. "You show up on my birthday next year with real flowers, ones you picked out yourself, and you write something in the card. Not a joke, not a placeholder, something real." His eyes welled. "Not all at once, just enough to glint in the porch light." "I will," he said. "I swear." And for the first time in years, I believed he might mean it, because this wasn't a boy playing grown-up anymore. This was a man learning how to rebuild a bridge that had nearly burned, and I wasn't standing at the edge, waiting. I was seated in my chair, shelling peas, watching to see if he'd build it plank by plank. I didn't hand him the real card that day, but I gave him something rarer, a second chance laced with limits, because love can be generous and still say no. Change doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet consistencies. That's what I reminded myself in the weeks that followed. Brandon didn't turn into a new man overnight. He didn't send me flowers the next morning or write a heartfelt apology with a Hallmark flourish. But he started showing up. Once a week he called, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. About work, about books, about that new documentary on grief I'd mentioned. The first few conversations were awkward. His voice uncertain, careful, like someone trying to remember how to knock on a door they used to barge through. Then came the day he showed up at my porch holding a brown paper bag. Inside, 3 cans of my favorite soup, a bouquet of tulips, fresh, trembling, and a handwritten card. Not plastic, not a joke, just this: "I thought about you today, and that felt like something worth writing down. B." I read it 3 times before I let myself smile. That was the beginning. Over the next few months, he started inviting me in, slowly. He asked me to lunch. Paid for it himself. He even sent me a photo of the budgeting app he'd downloaded, with a note. Trying to be better with my yeses. The card? I still had it. Still in the wooden box. I hadn't given it to him yet. And to my surprise, he never asked for it again. It was as if, for the first time, he didn't want access to my money. He wanted access to me. One afternoon, he called just to say he'd driven past our old school and remembered how I used to make heart-shaped PB&J sandwiches when he was nervous about spelling tests. "I know I forgot too much for too long," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Mom." And that was enough. Not because it erased the years, not because it fixed everything, but because it was real. And real love is never owed. It's offered. When my next birthday came, I didn't expect anything. Expectations had once starved me. But he arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a collared shirt, hair brushed, tulips in hand, red and yellow this time. He walked through the door, kissed my cheek, and handed me a card. No smirk. No stickers. Just folded paper and the soft weight of sincerity. Inside, in his own handwriting, you taught me that love isn't about what we swipe, it's about what we carry. I see you now, Mom, and I'm sorry it took this long. I didn't cry. Didn't need to. There was peace in knowing he had found his way back, not through guilt, but through growth. Later that night, I placed the real credit card into his hand. I trust you now, I said. Not because you're perfect, but because you're finally present. He looked stunned. I don't even know if I need it anymore. I know, I smiled. But it's not about the card, Brandon. It's about knowing where the boundaries are and respecting who built them. We ate cake, just the two of us. No performance, no guests to impress. He offered to help with dishes. I almost fainted. Have you ever watched someone you love slowly grow into who they were meant to be, even after disappointment? Tell me, do you believe in second chances, or do some lessons only come the hard way? Let's talk in the comments. Later that week, I sat at my kitchen table alone, sipping tea and reading his card again. I didn't save it in the velvet box. I pinned it to the fridge, front and center, because for the first time in years, his words weren't a memory. They were a beginning. I didn't raise a perfect man, but I raised one who's learning. And sometimes, that's the most you can ask for, and more than you dared to hope. I used to believe love meant sacrifice. Quiet sacrifice. The kind where you give until your arms are tired and your name is forgotten in the giving. And maybe, for a long time, that was true for me. But I've learned something in the stillness of these later years. Something I wish I could whisper to. Every mother sitting quietly in her kitchen, clutching her phone, waiting for a call that doesn't come. Love should never erase you. It should not come at the cost of your self-worth, your savings, your sleep. It should not ask you to carry someone who refuses to learn how to stand. The day I handed Brandon those plastic credit cards, I wasn't being petty. I was being precise. He handed me something hollow on my birthday, not just the flowers, but the meaning behind them. And in return, I handed him the shape of his own emptiness. But here's the part I didn't expect. Sometimes, when people finally see their reflection, they change. Not for you, for themselves. And that's what Brandon did. He didn't come back with grand speeches. He came back in inches, in small, steady acts that told me he was waking up. It took time. It took effort. It took boundaries that I should have built years earlier. But we found our way back. I still have the fake cards. I keep them in the drawer by the stove. Not as a threat, as a reminder that I can be loving and firm, that I can say yes with a open heart, and say no without guilt. I'm not the woman I was when this story began. I'm stronger now. Quieter maybe, but with a voice that doesn't tremble. I know my value isn't in what I give away, but in what I preserve for myself. Brandon. And I still have work to do. There are wounds that don't close in a season. But now, when he hugs me, it's not rushed. When he calls, it's not just out of need. And on my most recent birthday, he gave me real flowers. Lilies, my favorite. He even asked the florist to wrap them in linen instead of cellophane. Plastic doesn't feel right anymore, he said. He doesn't know I kept the ribbon from that bouquet. It's tied around the handle of my teapot now, where I see it every morning, not as a symbol of what was lost, but of what we rebuilt. And as I sit here writing this, I want to say something to anyone who's been taken for granted by someone they love. Be it a child, a partner, a friend. You don't have to burn bridges to set boundaries. You don't have to yell to be heard. Sometimes you just have to stop giving and start watching. Let them rise or let them fall. Either way, you'll finally know the truth. Because real love shows up when it's not easy, when there's nothing left to gain, only something to honor. And that's what I have now. Not perfection, but a son who brings me lilies and asks me how I'm really doing. And sometimes that's the quietest kind of miracle. If love becomes a transaction, stop handing out receipts, start handing back the silence, and wait to see who truly notices the quiet.